in Kenya. We also work in Peru and also in Laos and Thailand, in Southeast Asia, in Madagascar, and Kenya becomes the East African hub. Our mission is to co-design together with partners solutions that can lead to the coexistence or can create a relationship between people and nature where there are co-benefits. So conservation that brings benefit to both the nature and people. We apply what we call a solutionscape approach. So a solutionscape, think of a landscape where there are some challenges of shared vision and solutions are tested in a living laboratory. So not really in experiments in the strict sense of the experiment, but in a living laboratory where we can test solutions. Those that work, we can upscale, we can spread, we can grow them. Those that don't work, we also don't get angry about them, but we learn from them. We believe that the challenges in conservation for wildlife or even for our communities are interconnected in a complex web, local, global, national, interconnected through those scales, but also interconnected in terms of issues and the levels of solving them, so that we can apply the systems transformation approach in our work. We believe in breaking the silos, so building a coalition for change so that we can work together as a team. We work through partners, WRTI, National Museums of Kenya, and several other partners that we work with. Research is very key for us because we need to prove, we need to provide evidence, we need to provide the knowledge that drive what we do. So we have basically 5 key research areas, and we add a 6th one to it. And these 5 areas include biodiversity, land systems, environmental governance, political economy, climate scenarios, and the 6th one, which we have added, is technology and innovation. We are currently active here in Kenya in the Laikipia, Isiolo, Samburu landscape. Some of our projects include habitat connectivity, rangeland restoration, green growth for economic resilience, and the restoration of an important wetland in the northern Kenya called the Gambela wetland. Okay, so why do we think of citizen science here? So I will take, for the purpose of this side event, we are going to take one project that we handle in order to demonstrate how we use citizen science or how we apply citizen science in the monitoring. So this is the landscape restoration, and I take only one example where we use the semicircular bands, what you see here on your left. And so after they've been dug, the intention is that they should have some ecological outcomes or biodiversity outcomes. So these semicircular bands are put in order to increase the greenness, increase biomass, and if biomass is increased, it's expected that we will have, if I use the collective term, of biodiversity restoration in this landscape. So what we have seen is there is indeed some impact from the data that we have, including soil water infiltration and so on and so forth. But we need to prove that. We need to show that indeed there is a change in terms of biodiversity. And so in order to prove that, before we would run a comprehensive assessment, comprehensive biodiversity assessment. which is we need to bring the biodiversity experts, mostly working with the experts from the National Museums of Kenya. And they would go to the field in situ and conduct these assessments and then process the data. So 2 things emerge from this process. The first one is that it's quite costly. And the second one is that in that sense, research is seen as external. Science is seen as external, something that only comes and leaves. So the production of knowledge, if you like, is meant for an external entity. Yet, as we know, actors, communities who belong to these landscapes have also ways of producing knowledge and are important agents in shaping this landscape. So the thinking of, okay, why not involve these agents of change for their landscape? But we are not the first one to use citizen science. Of course, this is not to be a classroom, but just to point us to some reminders of what citizen science is and what entirely are we talking about. And we know that it's the active participation of non-professional, in our case, the communities who reside, who share the habitats that we try to restore with wildlife. And we involve them in the scientific research. And there are forms of doing that. One could think of them as collecting data, monitoring species identification, using digital apps, and I'm sure some of the participants here from your various organizations, you use apps with communities that give data and so on and so forth. So many approaches can be pointed to, but I want to highlight these 3 so that I do not make it sound like a classroom thing, but it can be contributory, where communities contribute data, whether it's using an app or manual systems, so they contribute data. It could be collaborative. They now don't just contribute data, but we see them as epistemic agents, actors who are also able to produce knowledge, okay, in their own ways. So you can think of using local ways of knowing to interpret the data, to help the scientists to interpret that data, to make meaning or to enrich that data. And the last one is perhaps even more advanced, where you involve them in the co-designing of the research itself and implementing it. And before I hand over to Dickens, who will give you our case, what we do, maybe I just want to also bring to us some pointers about why we are researchers, we are scientists. So why bother about communities? Why bother about another way of knowing? we are trained. But citizen science, as we know, can expand data coverage. There are areas where we cannot reach, but citizen science can help us to cover that. But can also help us to cover wide areas given limited resources and time. They can support biodiversity monitoring, including in tracking of species distribution, abundance, and migration. And Dickens will show you that. The third thing, and which is very important for me because I'm a social scientist, is citizen science helps to democratize science, to decolonize it, to demonopolize the production of knowledge, so that the production of knowledge does not only is not only vested in the professional scientists, but people produce knowledge in various settings. So in a way, it recasts the, if you like, epistemic or multiple epistems, different ways, and appreciating those different ways of creating knowledge. It encourages ecological stewardship. I am part of this process. I am producing knowledge. So it brings prestige and pride people taking pride in what they do in their landscapes, and promote societal impact. I think today we cannot overemphasize here that research needs to be meaningful to the local realities, to the local context where they are conducted. And citizen science can do that much better, in my view, I would argue, than the conventional ways of doing science. And then the last one there, and I put that one there because as the last one, because people usually run to the cost. Oh, I want to use citizen science because it is cost effective. I will use less resources. While it is so, and it is true, I don't think that it's what we should overemphasize on, but we should go to how it enriches research. So what is our case then? Going back to the landscape restoration, we wanted a way of conducting long-term monitoring to show and prove that really what we are doing on the landscape together with communities is restoring those landscapes is actually producing some biodiversity outcomes. And what we have selected for pragmatic purposes is to use indicator species. And I'm going to hand over to Dickens, who will take us through the step-by-step approach and to show you what we do and how we do it together with communities. Dickens, please.
Thanks a lot. Good evening. My name is Dickens Oden. I work with the WIS Academy for Nature, and together with my colleague, I would like to join him, proceed with the presentation. I think we have actually been involved in this biodiversity monitoring, and just like he says, the process of biodiversity monitoring has actually been expensive, and that has impeded even the data collections or data streaming. And with the new ways of doing things, we've actually started adopting citizen science to mainstream data, to start mainstreaming data. And with this, actually, even in one of my presentations that I presented under the governance, it's on data governance, it looks at how underrepresented even the community lands are. So some of these areas are quite inaccessible, and to get the data streaming from this landscape is not easy. So this is a process that we have actually conducted together with the National Museums of Kenya and the local community, trying to test it and see how we fly the local community can now adopt it. It's a process which is known to everybody. And before maybe I proceed, I would just like to pose some questions. These questions are very, very important, and it actually places you or give you a context of citizen science. Just to go through, maybe if you can prepare your your smartphone if you have, connected to internet, then maybe we can go through this. And maybe the first question is, which species from your childhood bring back old memories? And what would you do to ensure this species lives around you? What information would you give about the species? How often would you like to share information about this species? So once you've taken the code, yeah, you can scan it, please. Okay. Still seeing some hands up. You've succeeded? Okay, it's just a matter of trying. Maybe we don't need to get it right throughout. And then if you've answered it, I think yes, I'm seeing some answers coming in. I can see some answers coming in. And you can see if you written frogs, ibis adada, maybe speckled mousebird, elephant, lions. Yeah, so I will move to the next question, just in case the code is still there, you can grab it. The next question is, what would you do to ensure this species lives around you? So I would like to start seeing who is the first one. Avoid overuse of agrochemicals, improve habitat, respect their habitat, protect habitat loss at all costs, protect wetlands, no pollution of water to conserve their natural habitat. I educate the community about it, talk about its value to community, ensure wetlands are maintained, invest in community knowledge to self-protect, and can still continue. Planting indigenous tree, protect habitat, restore habitat, rangelands, avoid destroying forest. You can see the ideas that you have on this. And what information would you provide about the species? Can you think about it quickly? Distribution, that must be a GIS expert. Presence, ecology, conservation status, demographics. If I cite their eggs, the number and importance of migration, it's a calm species and among the big five. Its behavior and economic value, it is sensitive to pollution, threats found in healthy riverine, destruction of crops. I think you guys can be data streamers. Threat level, behavior, Let's move to the last one. I think so. How often would you like to share information about this species? For the information that you will provide, how often? If you see the same bird standing the same place, can you give us information it's still there, so that we see in 365 days, how do we understand that species, either in terms of presence, distribution, and many others. So we can see there is quarterly, monthly, following, weekly, yearly. Whenever I'm asked, I'm seeing somebody is not interested. Yes, but I'm seeing quarterly is actually leading. I would have asked why, but it's just good to stop there. So what is happening is actually information that we would require from the citizen or the local community or you. Probably if you are in another forum, I would say layman, but I know most of you are experts. So these are the data that we actually want. But you see, probably you just said frogs, but we need to know which frog, which species it is. If it is a mammal or bird, we need to know which species it is. And that is actually now the essence of monitoring. And because of this, we go to an extent of now training the local community in providing information, because they understand it in their local dialect. They can tell you that this bird is called this way. But now, in order to harmonize that information at an international level, they need to bring out even the common name of this species. And that is what actually we are trying to do. The National Museums of Kenya, working with the local community and the Green Earth warriors, educating or training the local community so that they can actually provide data about species. And through this, we cannot actually go through all the species on the landscape, but we just look at certain species. So these are the indicator species. The indicator species, they are actually keystone species that were selected, and because of their nature, they engineer the environment. They can quickly restore the environment quickly because of their behavior on the landscape or in the habitat. So thanks a lot. One of the activities or the interventions that we are undertaking on the landscape in Naibunga Mkogodo landscape, trying to restore the landscape using semicircular bands. And at the moment, over 150 has been established by the WIS Academy for Nature. And we have other players also on the landscape doing the same, and also other intervention types of interventions. Now with this intervention, we are expecting that nature, the landscape species will actually respond when there is greening. And with that, we started engaging the experts. But then we found that it was hectic, it's consuming, it's very deterrent. Now we adopted the indicator species. The indicator species would actually be monitored by the local community. But sometimes some of the methods or the approaches are broad spectrum. They can actually get other species. But we are interested on the indicator species because of their nature of engineering the ecosystem. And with all this data, we filter the selected species in order to actually see how the system is changing. So the indicator species is an organism whose presence, absence, or abundance reflects a specific environmental condition, ecosystem change, or ecological processes. That's the knowledge that that species provide us. And with this, it will actually tell us the status of that ecosystem. It will tell us if there is some signs of degradation that starts, and also it will also guide the process of the restoration so that we have a successful restoration. So that's actually the role for the species that are chosen. But we have criteria that we are using, and one, these species, as I said, they are indicator species. They are keystone species, and therefore they have ecological functions that they're doing. Their characteristics, the reproduction rate. We have a broad spectrums that those which actually have short rates of or life cycles. We have those that have long-term and mid-term life cycles. We have those which are habitat dependent. We have those actually, as we were selecting from the vegetation of the grass species, we selected along the hierarchy of the trophic positions so that you can actually see if the grasses are changing, the invertebrates, the habitofauna of the reptiles and amphibians. We have birds changing, we have mammals. So that hierarchy actually we selected based on that relationship. And so if we don't actually get information from a certain hierarchy, then there is an hierarchy that will actually provide an indication, because there is always a lag phase response in the ecosystem. And we also have the existing baseline data. This data was actually provided by the baseline assessment done by the National Museums of Kenya. The geographic range, we have those that are actually are residential, some are long range species. We have species that actually sensitive and they respond to certain receptors. Then we have these species that are easy to sample. And at the end of it, it must be cost effective, not expensive compared to the classical surveys that are conducted by the biodiversity experts. So these are the selections of these are the criteria that we are using to do that. And with all those indicator species, there is an information that also we want to show that there is a change on the landscape. The landscape where the restoration actually is implemented is a landscape that was near barren, and with this, it takes a lot of time for the system to reset itself naturally. But with the management induced on the landscape, it tries to accelerate the process. It tries to bring in very fast the species which are at a different ecological succession. And with that, you can actually have a mixture of species, either pioneering plus the mid succession stages. So we want to show how the restoration process, the interventions, are actually taking the landscape towards mid succession stage up to the climax, where we get the climax community or the late succession stage. And with all these stages, there are species that are actually known, either distinctively or overlapping between the stages. So we conducted this process with the stakeholder, the high level, the experts, and also the local community, trying to show where some of the species have been located, where they have observed, also trying to demonstrate even how some of the butterflies, they used to see from which direction they migrate to. And with that kind of understanding, species were actually selected, agreed upon, which one is easy for them to monitor without even presence of the experts. So with that, we ended up with a range of species. These are just examples of the mammal species. And one of them is the gravy zebra, the elephants, the aardvark, And with this, it's because of also the indications that they actually show on the landscape. What is the ecological indications? The experts agree on this, that whenever you see the population of gravy zebra increases, it means this. Whenever you see the presence of elephant increases, it means that the habitat is restructuring, and the elephant contributes to that. Whenever you see the aardvark, there is an indication that there are termites and even ants that are abundant on that landscape. So that choice of species was well informed and iterated by the experts and subjected to the local community, and they selected the range of the species. On invertebrates, we have the termite activities, we have the ants activities, and we have also the dung beetles activities. All these show us what is happening with the dung beetles. It shows actually that there are those grazers that drops their dungs on the landscape, and they uses it. The harvester ants means that there are more seeds on the landscape that they are now using for their food. They store it. We have also the birds itself that also we chose, and with the indications or the underlying principles for the indications. We also had the indicators herbs, which we had the reptiles and the amphibian species that were also chosen. Then we had the plant species, and this one were the pasture, mostly grasses and herbs which are grazed on. And we tried to characterize these grasses because these are the first species or group of species that actually restores the landscape. So with this, we took actually the community to start with simple method of even identifying the cover of the grass species. And we went through training on how to index some of the attributes of the species or the data itself that are collected, and sources of potential biases, and how to collect and submit this data. This is actually the sampling of the biomass, and we tried to mimic the sheep, which cuts up to down levels on the ground. And we had also the process now of data validation, and then the analysis process, which now lies with the experts. Then there is that part of data sharing that is in place, and we have started sharing some of this data in posters. And some of this work actually, you can see like the plant indicators, we can show in the control areas and the areas semicircular bands, that is the ACB. You can see the species that was selected. You can also see on biomass which was collected, how they are covering in those areas that are covered. The gravy zebra, you can also see its data there. We have the elephant activity. So this is actually some of the product that were conducted, the result of what we got from the exercise, a joint exercise between the NMK and the local community. So what do we have at the moment? We have now some of the activities. The activities that we conducted were actually site-based, but we know that there is a landscape influence of 150 plus others semicircular bands that are established. There is a wider influence on the landscape, and therefore we would like to have now a large-scale landscape level of monitoring, where we will be looking at the gravy zebra, we will be looking at the distribution of the elephant, using now the community streaming, sending the data where they observed these species, and what was the behavior. Did they have calves, or how were they walking in groups or just individual? So that kind of information, and they know when they behave like that, what's happening on the landscape, and that are the information that we need. So with this process, we would actually have data streaming from the community level, and we would like actually to spread it through so that we have capacity built on that landscape, and we would have data that is coming in, and we can actually attribute it according to even the GBIF standards, so that we have now data coming from the community landscape. So this is the process that we are doing, and I would like to thank all of you for listening, and also attribute my acknowledgement to the WIS Academy for Nature, the WRTI, and the conference organizers that has actually given us the space. We have the Green Earth Warriors who are actually helping us to implement all these ideas on the landscape, and the National Museums of Kenya, the experts who are working with the local community to really implement this process. I think I would stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have to moderate ourselves. So thank you very much, Dickens, for very step-by-step presentation approach. Now we have time. We have some time, some 10 minutes or so for engagement in comments, questions, input, if you like. And I think our colleague will be helping us to pass the mic around.
Yeah, thank you, Richard and Dickens. I have some few questions, and I think thank you so much for such a presentation about the citizen science. And I think just the way you have put it, it is a good way to go in our conservation sector, because as we kept saying, we as scientists, we keep talking to ourselves. I think to answer the question of us scientists talking to ourselves is to go the way of citizen science. But my question is, it's not about citizen science, it's about the project. I don't know whether I can call it the project or the program on the what do you call it? Semicircular bands. Experts, and when I look at this, I'm not new to it anyway. One, it is labor intensive, just the way you have said it. Two, it is a very expensive exercise. And my other point is that what is the model of scalability? Because WIS Academy and other partners or NGOs that are working with the communities, with the local communities, particularly on this program, it is rangeland restoration. So what is the chances of scalability considering the size of degraded land in the Laikipia, Isiolo, Samburu landscape? I'm just trying to think about how many circular bands are we going to construct in the entire landscape for us to be able to restore that land? So that is my first question. My second question is, what happens there is no donor money? Because right now, the few organizations that are working with the communities on this model are donor dependent. And what happens, and because right now communities are being given, if not daily allowance, they are given lunches, they are given some daily stipend or something like that for them to be able to do this. Because as I said, it's labor intensive, it takes a whole day. And so what happens? That is my second question. My other part of my question is also what happens to the restored sites? Because, you can restore a degraded land, but if you don't manage it, it will still go back to the same state. And I just wanted to have some clarification on what is being done. Yes, you have restored a degraded land using the semicircular bands. Yeah, after the rains, it will get green and get back grass. But what's the plan after that? Because otherwise, if I just open my cows, my goats, and business as usual, maybe the next season, before the next rains, the land is again degraded. And then my last question is that, is it not a short-term solution to land degradation, particularly in northern Kenya, which is currently, we are actually, if we can rank it, it is the biggest menace in terms of conservation, in terms of livestock, in terms of community livelihood. So is it really long-lasting approach or model to give us a solution to this problem? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, the two, and for the good presentation. I have two questions. These are purely on citizen science. As scientists, we are guided by certain principles that have been set before us. This is either the scientific nature or of whatever you're studying, and the ethical side of the same. So I would like to understand, how do you think the users of the citizen science approach could address ethical concerns or safeguards, such as consent and data ownership, when using the approach in research, especially this wildlife research? And the second bit, which is connected to it, is how do we, or how could we, how can citizen science using wildlife research ensure fair benefit sharing and protect community rights over data that they generate? Thanks.
We could take that one and then we can respond, right?
Thank you. My name is Wycliffe Mutero from International Fund for Animal Welfare. I congratulate you on the good work that you've done so far. I was curious to get to know about the tools that you've actually are using with the communities. The other one is also how things like literacy, how you've dealt with that. The third one is also, again, in terms of whether you're integrating what you are actually getting from citizen science with the traditional science that's done, by other, say, technical experts. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. We will handle both, and we cannot guarantee that we can answer all the questions. Nonetheless, we can engage. On scalability, I think that's an incredibly important question. And I think we can tackle that with the aspect of sustainability, donor funding dependency. So we have seen first of all, let me put it from the beginning. We do not claim that semicircular bands is the only way that rangeland restoration can happen. We say it is one of the ways, and that it can work in tandem. It could complement other approaches. Having said that, on scalability, we have seen quite good growth in terms of communities getting interested. Now we know, I've forgotten the name of the community in Baringo, Kashilitwa, that also approached us, having seen what was done in the landscape that we worked in, and we have moved there. But I want to tie that with the donor funding dependency, because I think it goes together. And this is not a question for rangeland restoration only. I think donor dependency is a discussion, is a debate that has been seen in development funding, development industry, and so many other areas. What we have started to entertain or to engage in very recently are two things. One is, can we tie rangeland restoration to incentives? What else? How else can the restored landscape produce benefits beyond just grazing, beyond greenness, and beyond biodiversity that we are talking about here? Can we tie it, for example, to economic incentives? So we've seen communities that are integrating that or combining that with other various economic activities, beekeeping, seed harvesting, and selling for those communities who want to buy seed. These semicircular bands are dug and then they are reseeded. Two is a mindset approach. We have recently started to discuss that, and we have started to co-design that with communities. A mindset approach. And we have gone to places where people are doing, in Kenya, can you imagine? People are doing restoration of their land without donor funding. And we were surprised when we went there. And when we asked them, the key was mindset change. So that donor funding only acts to facilitate the uptake. And then what happens after that is the people believing in what they are doing and taking it up, and only coming where they have shortfalls. So the mindset approach, we think, is something that we can inject and we can experiment with, and going forward we can also monitor how that is working. Indeed, if you restore the landscape without a plan, without grazing plan, I think we have already observed it, that it's not working. The place you have restored and it is constantly grazed, you are not making progress. So I completely agree with you. This has to be tied with some grazing plan, and we have co-designed it as grazing for restoration. So it's also something that we are very much aware of, and I think going forward, we are working with communities, with the Laikipia Conservancy Association, to see how there could be implemented grazing for restoration approach by developing the grazing plans, which is not easy to implement, I have to admit, but the fact that it is not easy to implement should not make us to fear from it. Dickens, I do not want to monopolize the discussion, and we are running the show with you. Perhaps you would like to handle the citizen science aspect, but there is a question there was on ethics, which I really liked, because one debate that is in citizen science is on data ethics and data justice. People have even argued in literature, I've read, in social science literature, I've read that can community members participating in generating the knowledge be authors of the papers, co-authors of the papers we write? That's very radical. So that's a debate that's ongoing. For us, we are very much aware about that. So data ownership, I think, is something that has to be discussed. We do not claim the ownership of the data, but something that we are discussing with the communities is, maybe Dickens should talk more about this, but how can communities own this data, and even if they want to share it on commercial thought, they can do so that the Visa Academy can buy the data from the communities. I don't know whoever researcher is sitting here can buy the data that was produced by the communities from them, and they can benefit from it. So, and then coming to consent, I think we have a very elaborate process for consenting with community members, and they have to agree and accept so that we can continue there. That's a very elaborate consenting process that we have. Dickens, you want to continue with the other comments?
Yeah, I think rightfully said, semicircular bands are just short terms, and we've observed in areas where they were established, there was a boom of grasses, and then the livestock and wildlife invaded those areas and completely reduced the amount of grasses or the biomass. So without actually complementing it with other approaches, it cannot succeed. And that's something that we have observed. And we've seen even some significant concentration of wildlife in those areas, the herbivores. So it means that even if grasses sprout up, they are all eaten by these herbivores, including the livestock. So I think I would just want to just talk about the incentives. One of them, I think Richard have mentioned, but we don't actually get into detail because there are some things that we are still discussing. What is the incentive for this intervention to be scalable? You know, there must be some motivation that actually makes somebody even wake up without being told to actually implement something, to do it at even household level, not just at community level. Because we've seen most of the work or intervention driven at community level, there is always some finance or money which are distributed, or food, and it's just something that occurs within a short time. Talking about data, we've actually tried to look at, can data, community data center, be effective in actually driving the local community even to conserve the biodiversity, the wildlife around. If we can actually work on this, and it has been a discussion that we want to actually implement in 2026, can we have a community data center empowered, the center that can actually even negotiate with the university to provide data. It can negotiate with even any organization to provide data, and there must be reciprocation for the effort that they are doing on that landscape. So with this, actually, we believe that the community will actually have that incentive to conserve the environment, to entertain the wildlife on the landscape, because from that data, they are getting something from it. And from even the restoration, they are getting something. So those are the incentives that we are trying to look at to see how can we really solve this problem. In Citizen Science 1, we are trying actually to use data-driven process that the community will actually be providing. And there is a protocol that we have developed so that the community can report this data to us seated somewhere in Nanyuki. The protocol, actually, we are trying to cover the standards that are in the Darwin Core, which DGBF are using. And that's why we selected few species that can actually be recognized easily by the community. And we will be using, one, we have those who are literate and they have the smartphone, and therefore we will be installing the Esri Survey 123 to actually stream the data. We will also be having boards where the community will be pinning the locations where they have observed these species, and there will be a quality assurance, a quality check with the experienced people on the landscape. So we actually have realized that these literate people, whether they are elderly, they know these locations. And once you train them on the map, they will tell you where the resources are. They will tell you where maybe animal concentration are, the salt lick, even from the map. And this actually, we succeeded with the NLC CETRAD on mapping the natural assets, they actually provided all these locations and even providing the names on the map. The map is made in a way that the base map information are there and it provide orientation to the people. And these are actually meant for the people who actually cannot use the smartphone, and they can locate it even if it is near a certain village. So we'll be using the villages where these people can tell us where around the villages, is it near a certain lager, is it near a certain road or whatever. So those are the features that we'll be using. So the cost or the resolution for reporting these actually is at 500 meters, 500 by 500 meters, where observations will actually be made, because we believe that within 500 meters for the large mammals, gravy zebra and elephant, the eyesight, that distance can actually be effective. So those are the tools that we'll be using from the field, and we'll be having the experienced youth who can actually interact with the old people, and they can locate this even on their app. If that youth actually calls from here and asks, have you seen the elephant today? Yes. Where have you seen it? The old man will describe where he has seen it, or the herder will describe where he has seen it. And with that precision of 500 meters, because we know that for the large mammals, even 1 kilometer is just enough for the locations. So that young man will put it in the survey 123, which actually is customized to pick the locations from wherever that person is and can go to the location which is described very well. So those are the data streaming method, but the data centers will have the boards where if there are unique locations, citations, these people can actually even go to this center and pin. And we have pins for the elephants and pins for even the populations that are actually observed. So the pins are actually in category, because most of the reportings, it will be like less than 5, less than 10, or more than 10, things like that. So we are using those kind of range to really also take data from the landscape. So those are the approach that we are trying to do. These maps are actually oriented in a way that any GIS expert can actually digitize it, either by warping or other maybe digitization methods to actually bring out these locations. So that is how we are planning to stream data from the landscape to come to us, and we can actually even share it. The other incentives on how the community will now benefit on the data, the discussion is in the process. Actually, on that landscape, we just arrived there as early as January, and we are trying to change things to re-engineer how the processes can be done. Going back to the semicircular band, the effectivity of the semicircular band actually requires knowledge. It is not all places where which degraded, you would use semicircular band. But there is a knowledge that actually should precede this process, because we know the landscape, dominantly, it has clay sand. And when the clay proportion is higher, then the infiltration or the composite intake rate of this soil, that is horizontally and vertically, is reduced as the composition of clay increases. And actually you can see when it rains, some bands can actually retain that water for even a week, which we expect it should actually infiltrate. Now that's a problem, because that water is lost either through livestock drinking, wildlife drinking, and many others. So we have actually now started, and will be implementing very soon, I think in the next 3 weeks, to look at how to enhance the performance of the semicircular bands. Because what we want to do is to take this water to a layer which is permeable and can take this water horizontally and supply it to the trees' roots, within the root zone layer. So that is what we are focusing on. After that, I think the other approaches will actually take over. The semicircular bands cannot be done throughout their lifetime, but it is just a trigger It is just an accelerator so that the landscape can actually pick up quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we are over our time, and we want to thank you so much for your patience and for coming. And then we come to the end of this session. You may have a wonderful evening, and we are still around. You can engage us. Thank you.